believe impedes U.S. market access, and that is where they landed. With me now is President Trump's senior counselor for trade and manufacturing, Peter Navarro. Peter, you, more than anybody else, has talked about non-tariff barriers, the importance of them, Vietnam in particular, kind of detailing them. We have the numbers now. We know what's going into place or what already has come into place when you talk about the floor. Do we know how much revenue it will raise? How much will the U.S. bring back in because of these new tariffs?
Phil, you did such an interesting job of running the numbers. Why don't we stick with that for a minute so I can walk you through it? You did it from an intelligent layperson's point of view. Let me kind of give you the economist tools, because it's based on concepts like export and import demand elasticities, currency adjustments, and things like that. But here's the analytical issue we're trying to do under the principle that the president wants to charge those countries what they charge us. As you pointed out, Vietnam has a applied tariff rate that's much larger than ours, but doesn't come near the tariff we've charged them. So the question is, how do you value the following, Phil? So let me count the ways. You got to value currency manipulation. You got to value the VAT tax distortions, dumping, export subsidies, technical barriers to trade, agricultural barriers to trade, quotas, bans, counterfeiting, intellectual property theft, and all of that. So here's the punchline. If you look at the trade deficit, which every country runs from us, the first thing economists should tell you, ask the next one you have on your show, should the U.S. have chronic and sustained trade deficits?
No, there's a
according to economic theory, they should not. So what the trade deficit does for any given country, it's the sum of all cheating. It's the sum of all unfair trade practices. And in a national emergency where the trade deficit itself is the national emergency and security threat because it takes our factories, our jobs, and transfers wealth abroad, the reciprocal tariff is that which reduces the trade deficit with each country to zero.
Peter,
and then we
I don't want to interrupt.
half of that.
But
that's the method.
No, I understand. This is actually what I want to ask you about, because it's important for people to understand, I think, that when you look at the memorandum that laid out the process to get to yesterday, on January 20th, in terms of trade flows, the deficit is it's in the first paragraph. It's in the first paragraph of the first directive as well. It is clearly kind of the cornerstone of how you guys are approaching this. And what I'm trying to understand here is it's a different method. I understand you don't believe trade economists understand what they're talking about. You don't believe...
Actually, we used the methods of the trade economists in order to estimate what you need to go to zero in the trade deficit based on commonly accepted elasticities estimated over the last 30 years. It's a very sound methodology. I think what the study does, Phil, it tells us just how huge the non-tariff barriers are. That's the problem. As bad as the higher tariffs are that these countries charge us, and they're bad. India's is 5 times higher than ours on average. They're Maharaja of tariffs. The trade barriers, the non-tariff barriers, are far worse. And you take me to any country. I was watching you go through all these countries, and you got like people in Asia you're reporting, and wow, they're shocked. Hey, the president has been saying, going back to the 1980s about Japan, is why is it that 95% of the cars in Japan are made in Japan?
No, Peter,
one of the reasons is they have a human impact test that requires us to imagine what it's like for a human skull to fall on a hood, and they simulate it with a bowling ball. We can't get the cars in there. You name any country, friend or foe alike, and I can tell you
I'm trying to actually approach this from a good faith basis and have
you did a great job.
I know you know this. I know how you talk about this stuff often. And I want to make clear, I'm not trying to skate over those issues. We just did a whole thing trying to justify it. My point is, though, is for people who are watching this right now.
Yes.
And I know your frustration with how things are covered and how people view the markets on a day-to-day basis. What will be the sign to them that this is all working? The president says, look, it's over. We're healing right now. It doesn't feel like it, and I think the end game that you guys have laid out, which is manufacturing comes back home in a significant way, you're redoing an entire system intentionally. That's not a quick fix. How will people know? When will they know?
I mean, this is the day after Liberation Day, but let's look at what the trajectory is. Let's take the auto industry, for example. What we've essentially been turned into an assembly operation. I noticed you had Stellantis, talking about Stellantis.
Yeah.
And look, it's one of the big three. It used to be Chrysler, but let's face it, it's owned by Fiat, and most of the engines that go into the cars that are assembled here are from Italy. I mean, that's not an American company as we once knew it. So the end game here for the auto industry is going to be to fill up all of the half-empty factories that now are operating at low capacities around Detroit and the greater Midwest area where the autos are made. And then we're also going to have more brownfield investment where abandoned factories for parts, and the parts are, frankly, far more important than the assembly. They're going to fill, and we're going to have Honda and Toyota and Mercedes and BMW, more and more of their content's going to be here because it has to be. And we're going to have tax breaks in the biggest tax cut in history coming in for consumers who buy American. So it's going to be a beautiful thing, and we're going to have UAW fully supports this because they know it's going to bring jobs. So across, go ahead, Phil.
No, I was just going to say, obviously the tax cuts debate is underway. You guys are very forceful on that and are pushing forward on that. I do want to ask, am I wrong in thinking that when you talk about, J.D. Vance was the vice president was kind of detailing this as well, when you're undoing a system that's been in place for as long as it has, because you think it's broken, but you're breaking it and doing something different that other people haven't done before, that disruption, by design, prices will increase. Is that...
See, here's what's so interesting. I mean, you have a guy like Mark Zandi on saying that kind of stuff. He's like a Barack Obama operative behind a macroeconomic forecasting thing. And he was the same guy who said, and this is why history's on our side, Phil, he was the same guy who said during the first term that the China tariffs, the steel and aluminum tariffs, the solar tariffs, the dishwasher tariffs, we're all going to lead to inflation and recession.
And Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary of the United States, said low prices is not the American dream.
We had price stability, and we had real wages rising. We had robust economic growth. So, I mean, if you go through, again, as an economist, if you go through the adjustment process, the foreign nations who have to sell here, are going to lower their prices, and then the next thing they're going to do is continue to manipulate their currency. So our currency is going to get stronger. We're going to have more purchasing power for the imports. That's going to offset it. As that's happening, the supply chains adjust and we come here. And then remember, as President Trump has said often and correctly, you don't have to pay any tariffs if you make it here. So it took decades for this to destroy America with this globalization of our supply chain. But I have this expression I call in Trump time, which was to get things done as soon as possible.
Right.
And what the companies who are going to prosper, if you look at how we're going to have a bull market in stocks, and we will. The companies who are going to prosper the most, this is who you should be looking at, are the ones who have already begun to move their supply chains here and who have anticipated that.
Yeah, the president has made that clear. That is the pathway forward. You guys have made clear the overarching pathway forward as well. Senior Trade and Manufacturing Counselor Peter Navarro, I know it's been a busy week. Thank you so much.
Great to talk to you, sir. It was enjoyable. Thank you.
Appreciate it. Well, coming